I was inspecting a general's office when I spotted a photo of a young girl on his desk. I went still. I knew that face. She'd been raised alongside me at the orphanage back in Texas. I muttered, "Sir, this girl used to live with me." He blanched, his lips now trembling as he breathed. "You mean my missing daughter? Can one single photograph shatter everything you've ever believed about duty, discipline, and the cold, hard rules of the military? Because for me, that's exactly what happened, and in that instant my entire world just stopped. It was just another Tuesday morning. Sun was streaming into General Alden's office, making the polished brass nameplates and his mahogany desk gleam. I was deep into a standard base inspection, running through my checklist, when my eyes landed on it, a photograph. A little girl, maybe 6 years old. Brown curls, bright blue eyes, and a face I knew. A face that slammed into me like a punch to the gut. The world went silent, then my own heartbeat roared in my ears. I knew that face. My inspection folder slipped from my hand, papers scattering across the carpet. My throat tightened, a dry, metallic taste filling my mouth. As I stepped closer, my hands were trembling. The silver frame was engraved with a single, devastating word: Emily. She was smiling, clutching a small stuffed marine bear. My pulse hammered so hard, it drowned out the ticking wall clock. "Something wrong, Major Collins?" The general's voice cut through the air, sharp and precise, but with a cautious edge. I swallowed hard, turning to face him. My hand, despite years of military training, was shaking as I pointed at the desk. "Sir, this girl, this child in the photo." He stepped forward, curiosity giving way to a sudden tension. "What about her?" "She lived with me. In the orphanage. In Texas." The words tumbled out, barely a whisper. His eyes widened, the color draining from his face. His lips parted, trembling, before he found his voice. "You mean, my missing daughter?" He looked at me like I'd just dragged a ghost into the room. I didn't know what to say. I was a Marine, trained to confront chaos, to face down any enemy. But standing there, the silence between us felt heavier than any battlefield I'd ever crossed. That morning had started so predictably. Coffee at 0600. Uniform pressed, crisp as fresh paper. Inspection orders neatly folded in my breast pocket. I was assigned to Fort Hood for a 3-month internal audit, a revolving door of departments, a new report every Friday. The rule was professional distance. Keep emotion out of the job. But life, let me tell you, it never respects rules for long. General Robert Alden was a legend across the Corps. A man of perfect posture, precise words. The kind of leader who could command silence just by walking into a room. I'd admired him from afar during my cadet years. Now I stood in his office, shaking like a terrified recruit. He motioned for me to sit. "Tell me exactly what you mean, Major." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing thoughts. "Sir, that girl, Emily, you said she was called Lily when I knew her. We grew up together in St. Mary's Orphanage, Waco. She was about my age, maybe younger. She came there when we were 6. The general's jaw clenched. "How can that be possible? Emily was taken from a park in Dallas 20 years ago. She was 4. I met his gaze, holding it steady. "Then she must have been found, sir." Found, and renamed. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The office clock ticked between us, a relentless, unfeeling sound. Then the general walked to the window, his reflection faint against the Texas sunlight. "I searched for years," he said, his voice quiet, raw. "Private investigators, military contacts, even federal channels. They found nothing. My wife, she died thinking Emily was dead." He turned to me, eyes wet but steady. "And now you tell me she lived?" I nodded slowly. "I can't be sure, sir. But those eyes. I'd stake my life on it." He exhaled hard, visibly steadying himself. "Tell me about her. What do you remember?" So, I told him about Lily's soft voice, her quiet laughter, her habit of tracing airplane shapes in the dust on our dormitory windows. How she'd hum old hymns to comfort the younger kids crying at night. And then I mentioned it, almost as an afterthought, how she had a tiny, crescent birthmark near her neck. His hand went to his chest, as though something had physically pierced him. Emily had the same mark. The general sat heavily behind his desk, all authority gone, replaced by profound grief and a dawning hope. Major Collins, if you're right, if my daughter was alive all these years, then someone kept her from us. His tone hardened, a flicker of the old fire returning. And I intend to find out who. I hesitated. Sir, with respect, this might go deeper than either of us think. Adoption files, sealed transfers, it won't be easy. He looked up, his eyes now sharp, unwavering. You're a Marine, aren't you? Yes, sir. Then we do not quit when something isn't easy. That sentence. Simple, firm. It lit something in me I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, exactly, but a kind of righteous determination. When I left his office, the sun outside felt hotter, the air thicker. My boots hit the pavement in a perfect rhythm, but my mind replayed the photograph over and over. Could it really be her? Lily. The girl who'd shared her half of a peanut butter sandwich when I was hungry. The one who'd whispered, "Someday, we'll both get out of here." I remembered the last time I saw her. We were 12. I'd been adopted by a family in Dallas, promised a new start. She'd hugged me tight, tears streaking her cheeks. "Write to me," she'd said. I promised I would. I never did. Duty had carried me far from that orphanage, from Texas to Okinawa to Quantico. But guilt travels faster than any deployment. Now, 2 decades later, her face had found me again, smiling from a frame in a general's office. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in my quarters, staring at the faint reflection of the moon on my medals. They suddenly felt lighter, or maybe emptier. I'd always believed the Corps taught me everything about loyalty and courage. But now I understood some battles aren't fought for your country. They're fought for the truth. And sometimes that truth waits in silence for years, like a photograph on a desk, until someone dares to look closely enough to see what's been lost. The next morning, I opened my laptop, typed the name, St. Mary's Orphanage, Waco, and pressed enter. The mission had begun. I arrived at the base before sunrise the next morning. The air was heavy with the scent of wet asphalt, and the American flag above headquarters fluttered faintly. I'd spent the night replaying every memory of Lily I could summon, the way she'd line up her crayons, her habit of humming when she was scared. I needed to be sure this wasn't some cruel trick of resemblance or wishful memory. When I walked into the general's office, he was already there, standing by the same window. He looked as if he hadn't slept either. His uniform was impeccable, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. "Major Collins," he said quietly, "close the door." I did. He gestured to a chair. "You said you knew my daughter as Lily? Tell me everything. From the beginning." I sat down, hands folded in my lap like I was back in front of a commanding officer at a disciplinary board. But this wasn't discipline. This was pain. "She came to the orphanage when I was 6, I began. She didn't talk much at first. The sisters said she'd been found near a gas station outside Waco. They didn't know where she came from. She didn't remember her last name. They called her Lily because she had a flower stitched on her jacket." The general stared down at his clasped hands. "Emily loved lilies," he whispered. "She used to pick them for her mother every Sunday after church." That silence again, the kind that fills a room like fog. "She was the kindest kid there," I continued softly. "She'd fix other children's toys, share food, stay up late to comfort the ones who cried at night. The staff said she'd been through something traumatic, but she smiled anyway. That's what I remember most. She smiled through everything." The general rubbed his temples. "I spent 20 years wondering if she was alive. And you're telling me she was smiling in an orphanage 3 hours away?" There was no accusation in his tone, only raw heartbreak. "I didn't know, sir. I swear I didn't know who she really was." He nodded slowly. "Of course you didn't. You were a child." Then his eyes lifted to mine, sharp again. Command restored. Do you still have any contact with the orphanage? I haven't been there since I joined the Marines, but I can go back. He exhaled deeply, the kind of exhale that sounds like surrender. Do it discreetly. No press, no channels. If someone hid her, I don't trust the bureaucracy to tell me the truth. I hesitated. Sir, I'll need authorization. I'll take care of the paperwork. He interrupted. You take care of finding out what happened. I gave a short nod. Yes, sir. He walked to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out an old envelope. He handed it to me. Inside was a faded photo, him, his late wife, and a little girl holding a toy airplane. Keep this, he said quietly, in case you need confirmation. I studied the photo. The child's eyes were unmistakable. Blue-gray, with that same earnest spark. Lily's eyes. When I left the office, the base seemed quieter than usual, like even the air was listening. The drive to Waco took 3 hours, but it felt like I was crossing 20 years. The road stretched endlessly through fields of rusted fences and half-tilled soil. My reflection stared back at me from the windshield, uniform crisp, eyes shadowed. Somewhere between Dallas and Waco, I stopped seeing Major Collins in the mirror. I saw Tessa, the orphan girl who once believed family was something you earned through good behavior. When I arrived, the orphanage looked smaller than I remembered. The red bricks were chipped. The sign faded. St. Mary's Home for Children. The gate creaked open as I pushed it. Inside, the hall smelled of floor wax and dust. The same long corridor. The same wooden cross above the entrance. A familiar voice greeted me. Well, I'll be. Sarah Collins. It was Sister Agnes, older now, face-lined, but her eyes still kind. She hugged me tightly. You've grown into such a fine woman, a Marine no less. Still trying to earn my keep, I said with a smile. She looked at my uniform. You're not here for inspection, are you? No, sister. This is personal. Her expression shifted. I thought so. You've got that look, like you're about to dig up ghosts. I told her about the general's photograph, about Lily. Her face softened, then saddened. I remember her, she said quietly. Sweet girl, never caused trouble. Always drawing airplanes and flowers. She cried for her father every night at first. After a year, she stopped. My throat tightened. What happened to her? She was transferred. That's what the paperwork said. Houston Foster Care Program, 2006. A new family, supposedly, but we never got confirmation. Back then, records were unreliable. Do you still have her file? Sister Agnes nodded and disappeared down a hallway. When she returned, she was holding a dusty brown folder. Not much left. We lost most files in the flood 10 years ago. Inside, I found a few photocopies, medical forms, vaccination records, and one faded photo of Lily. On the back, written in the sister's neat hand. Transferred by request of State Social Services, case ID 77HC. I snapped a photo with my phone. Sister, I asked carefully, who approved the transfer? Her brows knit. I don't remember the man's name. He wasn't one of ours. Military, maybe. He wore a badge, not a collar. I froze. Military? Yes. Said it was part of an emergency relocation after a hurricane. There was no hurricane in Texas that year, I whispered. Sister Agnes looked startled. Are you sure? I'm sure. For the first time, I felt a cold certainty crawl up my spine. Someone had used military credentials to move Lily and hide her. When I thanked the sister and walked out, the late afternoon sun hit the building just right. The old bricks glowed amber, and for a second, I imagined Lily's laughter echoing through the courtyard again. But the echo was gone. Only the wind remained. As I started my car, my phone buzzed. It was a message from General Alden. Keep me updated. I've reopened my daughter's case file. And Major, be careful who you talk to. Some ghosts wear uniforms. I looked at the orphanage in my rearview mirror and whispered, Yes, sir. Because he was right. Some ghosts don't haunt cemeteries. They haunt paperwork. And I was about to wake them up. I drove away from Waco with the folder sitting on the passenger seat like a silent passenger. Every few miles I glanced at it, brown edges curling, the word confidential, stamped in red ink across the top. I'd handled classified intelligence in combat zones, decrypted orders during blackouts, even read casualty lists that could break the hardest heart. But nothing felt heavier than that thin file. The highway stretched wide and endless under the Texas sun. Flat fields blurred into the horizon. And with every passing mile, I felt like I was driving deeper into my own past. When I joined the Marines, I promised myself I'd never look back. I buried St. Mary's. Buried Tessa. Buried every lonely night in that dormitory with its peeling paint and creaking beds. Duty gave me a new name, a new spine, a new life. But life has a way of dragging your history back into the light when you least expect it. By the time I reached my quarters at Fort Hood, it was nearly dusk. I didn't turn on the light. I just sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and began typing in what little information I had. Case ID 77HC. Houston Foster Care Program, 2006. Nothing. No digital record, no archived file. It was as if Lily, or Emily, had vanished twice. I sent a message through a secure military channel to an old contact, Captain Elena Brooks, now working in the JAG office at the Pentagon. Need access to restricted relocation archives, 2006, code 77HC. Possible military involvement. Quiet request. A reply came 5 minutes later. You realize this could be above clearance level. Then find someone whose clearance is higher. I typed back. I hesitated before hitting send. But then I saw Lily's face in my mind, smiling, trusting, unaware of the world's cruelty. I hit enter. The next morning, I returned to the orphanage. I wasn't finished with St. Mary's. Not yet. Sister Agnes was outside, tending to a small rose garden near the chapel. The smell of soil and lilies mixed with the faint scent of old paint and memory. Back so soon? She asked, straightening her back with a groan. I need to look through old storage, I said. Boxes, receipts, letters, anything from 2006. She hesitated. Then nodded. Follow me. The storage room was in the basement, where the air smelled of mildew and forgotten prayers. We walked between stacks of old toys, broken furniture, and boxes labeled with years. I found the one marked 2006 to 2007, and began digging. Inside, among yellowed papers and brittle folders, I found an envelope labeled Metropolitan Social Relief Program Emergency Evacuation Order. Stamped at the top corner. U.S. Department of Defense Temporary Relief Initiative. The date matched the year Lily was transferred. I opened it carefully. Inside was a list of names, birth years, approximate locations. Most were smudged or illegible, but one line was clear. Child ID 217L. FEMA relocation. Guardian request pending. Next to it was a faint signature. The ink had bled, but I could still read part of it. M.O. Matthews. The name meant nothing to me yet, but something about the handwriting felt military. Precise. Deliberate. Sister Agnes leaned over my shoulder. We never saw those papers, she said softly. They just showed up one day with the men who took her. The men? Yes, 2 of them, both in uniform. They said she was being transferred for her safety. I stared at the paper. Safety from what? She shook her head. They never said? That night, I sat in my car outside the orphanage, engine off, lights dimmed. The town was quiet, only the hum of cicadas and the occasional passing truck. My phone buzzed. A message from Elena. Got something. The relocation order, code 77HC, was processed through a defense logistics branch in Killeen, handled by Colonel M. Matthews, U.S. Army, retired 2010. Address attached. Proceed carefully. He's well connected. I stared at the screen. Colonel M. Matthews. That name felt like a locked door I'd just been handed the key to. I copied the address, a suburb of Georgetown, about an hour from the base. I should have waited for authorization, filed a report, gone through channels. But this wasn't an official mission. It was personal. And personal missions don't wait for permission. The next morning, I put on civilian clothes, jeans, a gray t-shirt, and my old leather jacket. The Texas heat was already rising by 0900. I parked across the street from a neat single-story home with a manicured lawn and a U.S. flag fluttering from the porch. The kind of place that looked ordinary from the outside, but carried ghosts inside its walls. Colonel Matthews answered the door himself. Late 70s, trim, still carried himself like a soldier. His handshake was firm, but cold. "Major Collins, you said? I retired years ago. What's this about?" "Relocation orders," I said evenly. 2006, Texas region. A program that involved a little girl from Waco. He frowned, pretending to search his memory. "You'll have to be more specific." "Case ID 77HC, I said, watching his face. His pupils contracted, just a flicker, but enough. "Never heard of it," he replied, stepping back. "Now, if you'll excuse me," I blocked the door with my boot. "Sir, I'm not here to cause trouble. But I think you know exactly what I'm talking about." He glared at me. "Young lady, you're out of line, Marine." "Maybe. But I've buried too many truths in the name of following orders. Not this one." For a moment, I thought he might slam the door. Then his shoulders sagged. He motioned me inside. The living room smelled faintly of cigar smoke and lemon polish. On the wall hung framed commendations, photos of a younger Matthews with generals and senators. He poured himself a drink, hands trembling just enough for me to notice. "That file should have stayed buried," he muttered. "So it exists," I said quietly. He looked at me over the rim of his glass. "You're chasing something that will break a lot of people if you dig too deep. Was it your idea to move her?" He sighed. "No. Orders came from above. Said it was for national security." "National security?" I almost laughed. "She was a child." Matthews's eyes hardened. "Not my decision. My job was to follow through." "Whose decision, then?" He hesitated. "The request came through a classified channel, marked with an old defense seal. Office of Strategic Infrastructure. You'll find nothing online. They made sure of that." He refilled his glass and said, almost to himself, "That girl. She looked scared when they took her. Kept asking for someone named Tessa." I froze. "That was me." He turned toward me, eyes narrowing. "Then you already know too much." Before I could respond, he took a long drink, set the glass down, and whispered, "Be careful who you serve, Major. Some commands come from men who've forgotten what honor means." I left his house with my pulse hammering. The sun outside burned my skin, but inside I was ice cold. I had my first lead, and my first enemy. By the time I got back to the base, the Texas sky had turned the color of gunmetal. The air was thick, restless, carrying the smell of rain. I parked near the hangars, sat in my car for a moment, and let the engine tick down to silence. My mind was louder than the thunder forming over the horizon. Colonel Matthews's words kept echoing. Some commands come from men who've forgotten what honor means. That was a warning, and I knew it. In the Marines, warnings like that don't come from fear. They come from guilt. I opened my laptop and began cross-referencing everything: his service years, the FEMA relocation program, Defense Logistics Division. Buried deep in an old database, I found a memo tagged Confidential Infrastructure Recovery Operations, July 2006. The signature line read, M. Matthews, DLD. Underneath, 3 initials caught my eye. HV. I didn't need to guess who that was. My father had spoken the name before he died. Harold Vance, now a powerful Undersecretary of Defense, once a major stationed right here in Texas. He and Alden had served together early in their careers, but their paths split sharply. Alden took the moral route. Vance took the political one. If Matthews had been taking orders from Vance, this went far beyond a misplaced orphan file. I picked up the phone and called General Alden. "Sir, it's Collins. You found something." His tone was steady, but tight, like a wire pulled too hard. "Yes, sir. A Colonel Matthews handled a 2006 relocation order. He claims it came from an upper channel, something called strategic infrastructure." Silence. Then, "Harold Vance." A long pause. "I suspected, sir. He's still in Washington. You think he'd risk exposure now?" "Men like Vance don't see risk," Alden said grimly. "They see leverage." He exhaled slowly. "Listen, Major. This stops being an inspection now. This is intelligence. You tread carefully. I'll reopen my daughter's case quietly, through personal channels." "Yes, sir." After the call ended, I stared at the phone in my hand. Intelligence? That word changed everything. Because in my world, intelligence meant shadows, power, and the kind of secrets that swallowed people whole. The storm broke just after midnight. Rain hit the barracks roof like gravel. I couldn't sleep, so I opened the old folder again. There, beneath the paperwork from St. Mary's, was something I hadn't noticed before, an envelope wedged between the pages, unmarked. Inside was a single sheet of yellowed letterhead. Department of Defense Emergency Operations Division. It was a memo addressed to Colonel Matthews. Subject: Reassignment of Minor ID 217. Nell. Directive: Proceed under civilian cover. No further record to be maintained. Authorization code: HVTXOPS. No name, no signature, just those initials again. I felt the hair rise on my neck. Whoever HV was, he had the power to make a child vanish without a trace and the arrogance to sign it like a stamp of ownership. I scanned the document and encrypted it on a flash drive. Then I did something reckless. I called Captain Elena Brooks again. "Elena, I need a favor." "You already got one," she said dryly. "What is this really about, Sarah?" "A child. A missing girl. A cover-up tied to a defense project from 2006. There was a pause. "You're talking about a ghost program. Then tell me how to find a ghost." "Carefully," she said, and quietly. "I'll run your memo through an old clearance pathway. But if you're right about Vance, you could be putting a target on your back. I've had worse." After the call, I sat there listening to the rain. I should have felt fear, but instead I felt calm, focused, the same stillness I used to feel before stepping into a combat zone. Only this time, the enemy wasn't across a desert. He was behind a desk. The next morning, I met General Alden again. He looked different, tired but steadier. There was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Resolve. I handed him the flash drive. "Sir, this is the memo that links Matthews to Vance." He plugged it into his laptop, scrolled through the scanned image, and went pale. "Authorization code HVTX. Oops. He used an operational seal that was shut down in 2004. Meaning? Meaning he revived a dead program under a fake directive. No oversight, no accountability." He leaned back, rubbing his temples. "You understand what this means, don't you? If this comes out, it'll shake half of Washington." "With respect, sir," I said quietly, "I don't care about Washington. I care about Emily." He looked at me, a flicker of pride breaking through the exhaustion. "You sound like her mother." He stood and walked to the window. "You've done enough. Let me handle it from here." I shook my head. "Sir, you can't do this alone. Whoever covered this up still has resources. We need evidence. Proof she was transferred, not lost." He turned, voice low but fierce. "What are you suggesting?" "Let me talk to Matthews again. This time off record." He hesitated. "If you push him, he'll push back. I'm a Marine, sir. I know how to handle pressure." 2 nights later, I drove to Georgetown again. The neighborhood was quiet, porch lights glowing like sentries. I parked a block away and waited until the street was empty before walking up to Matthews's house. When he opened the door, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. He knew why I was there. "Major Collins," he said, voice rough. "You should have stayed out of this." "Too late," I replied. "I found the memo." He froze. "Then you know what it means." "I know it means someone used your authority to cover up a kidnapping." He shook his head violently. "You don't understand. That order wasn't mine. I was told to sign it or lose everything. My pension, my record. They said the girl was under federal protection, that her father was compromised. Her father was a Marine general, not a criminal." Matthews's expression cracked. "I didn't know that. I swear I didn't." He sank into his chair, trembling. "I thought I was helping a child, not burying one." I pulled out my recorder and set it on the table. "Say that again." He stared at the blinking red light. "You think a confession will change anything? Vance still sits in D.C., untouchable. People like me, people who followed orders, were the ones who pay. Then help me make him pay." For a long moment he didn't move. Then, quietly, he nodded. "You'll find what you're looking for in Logistics Archives, Houston Branch. Box 47C. I can't get you in, but you can. You still wear the uniform." He pushed a folded piece of paper across the table. "A keycard. It'll work once. Don't come back here after you use it." I stood. "Thank you, Colonel." He didn't look up. "Don't thank me, Major. Pray I never have to see that little girl's eyes again in my sleep." Outside, the rain had stopped. The moon cut through the clouds like a blade, and the air smelled of wet earth and second chances. As I slid behind the wheel, I held up the key card against the dashboard light. One use. One chance. And maybe, just maybe, one step closer to the truth. By the next morning, the Texas sky was washed clean. The air smelled of dust and wet cedar. I'd barely slept, running on coffee and adrenaline as I prepared to head for Houston. Before I left, I had to see General Alden one more time. He deserved to know what I was walking into. When I stepped into his office, he was standing at attention by the window, staring at the parade field below. Sunlight caught the silver streaks in his hair. For a moment, he looked less like a general and more like a father waiting for news he was afraid to hear. "Sir?" I said quietly. He turned. "Collins, you look like you've been through a war." "Maybe I have." I set the key card on his desk. "Matthews gave me this. It's for the Logistics Archives in Houston. Box 47C. He said that's where the real records are about Lily, or rather, Emily." Alden's jaw tightened. He talked. "He's scared, sir. Said the order wasn't his. He signed under pressure." The general studied the card for a long moment. "Pressure from Harold Vance." It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." Matthews admitted it. He nodded slowly, as if confirming a suspicion he'd carried for years. "Vance always had power friends, senators, defense contractors, lobbyists, the kind of men who believe loyalty is a currency." I hesitated. "Sir, I don't mean disrespect, but why would anyone target you? Why take your daughter?" He took a long breath and sat behind his desk. "You ever make an enemy out of the wrong man, Major?" "Plenty, sir." He gave a small, humorless laugh. "Then you'll understand." He opened a drawer and pulled out a weathered folder. Inside were newspaper clippings, photocopies, and one yellowed letter. He pushed it toward me. "Read that." The letter was typed, signed only with the initials HV. "Step down from command or your family will pay." I looked up, startled. "I received that the week before Emily disappeared," he said quietly. "At the time, I was overseeing an investigation into defense logistics contracts, specifically Vance's unit. I found proof of procurement fraud. Millions in unaccounted funds. I planned to take it to the Inspector General." He looked past me toward the window, eyes unfocused. 2 days later, she was gone. The police thought it was random. A child abduction from a park. But I knew better. I set the letter down carefully. You think Vance retaliated? I don't think, Major, he said firmly. I know. The room went still except for the soft whir of the air conditioner. He continued, voice lower now. My wife, Claire, never forgave me. She blamed my career, my pride. She thought if I'd left the Corps, we could have been a normal family. She was right in a way. I buried myself in work. When she passed 5 years later, I buried myself deeper. His hands trembled slightly as he poured a glass of water. I've carried that letter every day since. A reminder that some victories come too late. I swallowed hard. Sir, if Vance is behind this, he didn't just destroy your family. He corrupted the very institution he swore to serve. He looked up sharply. And now you see why I've stayed quiet. The Corps is built on honor. But honor can't survive scandal. If this comes out wrong, it'll tear through command like wildfire. Careers will end. Recruits will lose faith. Sir, with respect, I said gently. The truth deserves daylight, even if it burns. He studied me, then smiled faintly. You remind me of Claire. She had that same fire. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, Do you believe Emily's alive? Yes, sir. I've seen too many impossible things to believe otherwise. He nodded slowly. Then, find her, Collins. Not for me. For her. She deserves to know who took her life from her. He stood, buttoned his uniform jacket, and extended his hand. I rose instinctively and saluted, but he shook his head. Instead, he reached across and gripped my shoulder. You've done more for me in a week than a dozen investigators did in 20 years. I'm grateful. Just doing my duty, sir. Not just duty, he said. Something more. On my way out of headquarters, I stopped by the memorial wall, names etched into stone. Marines who'd fallen in service. I ran my hand over the names, remembering faces I'd known and those I hadn't. Each name was a story unfinished. Emily's story wasn't finished either. Back in my car, I thought of Matthews's trembling hands, of the forged directives, of Alden's haunted stare. Power, pride, corruption. It all seemed so far from the values we swore to defend. But then again, isn't that how betrayal always starts? Slowly, from inside the house? That evening, I drove to the old base chapel. The door creaked as I stepped inside. Candles flickered near the altar. I wasn't there to pray. I wasn't sure I even knew how anymore. But I needed silence. The light from the stained glass windows spilled over the pews, fractured blues and golds. I sat down and let my head fall into my hands. When I finally looked up, I saw a small plaque near the front, dedicated to those who serve in truth. I smiled faintly. Truth. That's what this was really about. Not revenge. Not orders. Just truth. My phone buzzed, shattering the stillness. A message from Captain Brooks at the Pentagon. Received your memo image. Verified clearance code. Vance's authorization is real, but the operation itself doesn't exist in any active record. You're chasing a black project. Proceed with caution. A black project. That explained everything, and nothing. I texted back. If it doesn't exist, how do I find it? Her reply was instant. Find who wanted it erased. Follow the money. Always follow the money. I pocketed my phone and rose from the pew. Outside, the evening sun dipped low, washing the base in amber light. It hit the chapel's stained glass, scattering color across the floor. For a brief moment, it looked like the world was on fire. I took that as a sign. Tomorrow, I'd drive to Houston, use the key card, and open box 47C. Whatever was inside would either set a family free or end my career for good. As I walked away, I caught my reflection in the chapel window, uniform sharp, eyes weary, jaw set. Somewhere behind that reflection, the girl I used to be, the orphan named Tessa, was watching. She didn't look afraid anymore. She looked ready. The drive to Houston took 4 hours, though it felt longer. The highway stretched on like a ribbon of faded silver beneath the sun, and my thoughts raced ahead of me. The keycard Matthews had given me lay on the seat beside me, its chipped plastic catching the light every few minutes like it was winking, daring me to use it. When I crossed into the city limits, the skyline rose out of the heat haze, all glass and ambition. Somewhere below those towers, in a basement or a warehouse, the truth waited, sealed inside a box marked 47C. The address Matthews had scribbled led me to a nondescript industrial building on the south side, surrounded by a chain-link fence. A faded sign read, Federal Logistics Storage Facility. No guards. No cameras. Just a keypad entry and a sense that this place hadn't seen daylight in years. I swiped the keycard. The green light blinked. The lock clicked open. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of cardboard and metal dust. Rows of shelves stretched into shadow, each one stacked with identical gray boxes marked with code numbers. My footsteps echoed softly, the only sound in that cavernous space. Box 47C. I walked past 43, 44, 45. When I reached 47, I saw the shelf near the bottom. My hands shook as I pulled the box free. It was heavier than I expected. I set it on a table, peeled off the seal, and opened it. Inside were folders, hundreds of them, files labeled with initials, dates, and locations, disaster relief, refugee transfers, special custody cases. But one file was different. Thinner, newer, marked with a single red line across the top. ID 217L. FEMA relocation. I opened it carefully. The first page was a birth record. Female, approximate age 6, no last name. Found outside Waco, Texas. Transferred to St. Mary's Orphanage. Subject exhibits signs of memory loss, possible trauma. At the bottom, under remarks, was authorized relocation to Houston Foster System under Directive HVTXOPS. I flipped through the rest. A single photograph fell out. A little girl with curly brown hair and pale blue eyes clutching a toy bear. I knew that face. Lily. Emily. The next document was stranger, a psychological assessment stamped classified. It described the child as adaptable, high-functioning, with a stable temperament, as if she were part of a study, not a missing person. Then came a list of names, agencies, handwritten notations. Transfer complete. Case closed. And at the very end, stapled to the back, a signature I hadn't seen before. Authorized by L. Colleen Vance. I stared at it, my heart hammering. Proof. Actual proof. I took photos of every page, then slipped the photo of Lily into my jacket pocket. The rest I left untouched. I closed the box and was about to leave when a sound made me stop, the faint metallic click of a door latch. I turned. A man stood in the entrance, silhouetted by sunlight. Late 40s, neat suit, crew cut, expression cold. Major Collins, he said smoothly. You shouldn't be here. My hand went to my ID instinctively. Who are you? He stepped forward, holding up a badge. Department of Defense Security. Name's Callahan. You accessed the restricted facility using an invalid keycard. Invalid? I asked carefully. Retired clearance. Belonged to Colonel Matthews, who, by the way, is now under federal review for unauthorized disclosures. I swallowed. You're with Vance, aren't you? His lips twitched. Let's just say I answered to people above your pay grade. He extended a hand. Hand me the file. Not going to happen. His eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake, Major. That file is sealed for a reason. I know, I said, my voice low. Because it's evidence of a crime. He took a step closer. You think the system will side with you? You're one officer against the Pentagon. I've been outnumbered before. He sighed. You Marines. Always so noble. So willing to die for truth, even when it buries you. Before he could reach me, I backed away toward the far wall. My right hand hovered near my pocket where my phone recorded every second. Touch me, and that recording hits 10 inboxes. He froze. The corner of his mouth twitched. half a smirk, half irritation. You don't understand what you've opened. But he didn't explain. He turned and walked out the door, slamming it behind him. I stood there in the silence, my pulse loud in my ears. Whatever this was, I'd just stepped into a war no one wanted to admit existed. I drove straight to a quiet diner on the outskirts of town, parked where I could see the highway, and transferred every photo from my phone to the cloud. I sent copies to Captain Brooks, and one to a private, encrypted drive I used on deployments. Then I ordered black coffee and sat there thinking, Vance's authorization, Matthews's fear, Callahan's warning. It all fit. A pipeline of secret relocations under the guise of national security. But Emily wasn't a spy or a witness. She was a child. My phone buzzed again. It was a number I didn't recognize. Collins, I answered. Major, this is Detective Ramos. Houston PD Captain Brooks gave me your contact. His voice was rough, steady. The voice of someone who'd seen too much. She says you might need a pair of eyes down here. I do, I said. How do you feel about digging up old ghosts? He chuckled. I work homicide. That's half my job. I gave him a brief summary: the missing girl, the file, the federal interference. He didn't flinch. I can pull the orphanage closure reports from that year, he said. Maybe we'll find a name that slipped through the cracks. Thank you, Detective. One thing, Major, he added. If you're right about this, and this Vance character really had that kind of reach, don't go anywhere alone. I glanced at my rearview mirror, half expecting to see Callahan's car behind me. Nothing but trucks and sunlight. I'll be fine, I said. Every soldier says that, Ramos replied. And every ghost does, too. That night, I checked into a cheap motel outside Katy. I didn't trust base lodging. Not after the break-in at the facility. The sheets smelled like detergent and dust. The AC rattled. But it was anonymous. I set the photo of Lily on the nightstand and stared at it for a long time. The smile. The curls. The innocence. What kind of man takes that away? Outside, the hum of the highway blended with the soft crackle of thunder in the distance. I thought about the general, about the day he'd find out his daughter wasn't dead, just hidden. About the look in his eyes when he finally saw her again. If she was still alive, I'd find her. And if the man who took her was still breathing, well, that would be a different kind of justice. I turned off the lamp, the room fading to darkness, and whispered to the quiet. Hold on, Lily. I'm coming. By morning, I'd memorized every document I'd photographed, every name, every code. I could still see that red line stamped across the file. Authorized by L. Colleen Vance. It burned in my mind like an open wound. The motel coffee was weak and bitter, but it kept me moving. Detective Ramos met me in the parking lot, a tall man in a plain brown jacket, with the posture of someone who'd done his own share of patrols. Major Collins, he said, shaking my hand. You've stirred up a hornet's nest. I gave a small smile. Story of my life. He opened a folder. I went through the archives you mentioned. St. Mary's was part of a foster system audit in 2007. 6 kids were listed as transferred to Houston, but only 5 arrived. One name missing from the log, Lily Carter. I exhaled. That's her. That's Emily Alden. Ramos nodded. Here's the kicker. The transfer was signed by a deputy coordinator, Harold Vance. It was an internal document, never meant for public record. So, he used his military credentials to move a child off the grid. I finished for him. Ramos looked grim. And then erased her. We drove to Matthews's house that afternoon. The front blinds were drawn tight. No movement. I knocked twice. No answer. The third time, the door creaked open a few inches. Colonel Matthews! I called out. Silence. Ramos drew his weapon, motioning for me to stand back. We entered cautiously. The house smelled like stale bourbon and old smoke. A lamp was knocked over, a picture frame shattered on the floor. Matthews was slumped in his chair, head tilted, a bottle still in his hand. An empty pill container on the table. I knelt beside him. No pulse. Ramos swore softly. Suicide. Maybe, I said. But look. Pinned to Matthews's shirt pocket was a note. 4 words. Shaky handwriting. I tried to warn you. At the precinct, Ramos's contacts processed the scene. The official story would say overdose. But both of us knew better. Someone had gotten to him first. I left Houston that night, my hands gripping the wheel hard enough to hurt. Matthews's death changed everything. Now it wasn't just about a missing girl. It was about silencing anyone who got too close. When I got back to Fort Hood, I went straight to the general's quarters. The guard at the gate let me through without question. He was sitting in his study when I entered, still in uniform, tie loosened, the same haunted look in his eyes. Matthews is dead, I said quietly. He froze, the glass of whiskey halfway to his lips. How? Pills. But I think it was staged. He left a note. Alden set the glass down with trembling hands. Vance, he whispered. Sir, he knows we're close. I think he sent someone after the files. You're not safe here. He gave a faint, weary smile. Major, I stopped being safe 20 years ago. I took the photo of Lily/Emily from my jacket and laid it on his desk. I found this in the Houston archive. There's proof of the relocation, of Vance's signature. He stared at it for a long time. Then his hand went to his face, covering his eyes. I heard a sound I hadn't heard from him before, a low, broken sob. When he finally looked up, tears streaked his weathered face. My God, she's alive! We can't be sure yet, I said softly. But the trail's warm. He nodded slowly, pulling himself back together. Then we follow it. Where does it lead? Vance, I said simply. All the way to D.C. 2 days later, we landed at Andrews Air Force Base under the guise of a logistics audit. The general had enough clearance to keep us off the radar. But secrecy in Washington is like fog, it looks solid until you touch it. Captain Brooks met us outside the Pentagon. You two are insane, she said, pushing her sunglasses up. You realize what happens if you accuse an undersecretary without hard proof? I've got proof, I said. A signed authorization. Death. And 20 years of silence. She sighed. Then I hope you've got more than that, because Vance has friends who can erase you before breakfast. We don't need his friends, the general said evenly. We just need 5 minutes in his office. We got those 5 minutes. Barely. Vance's office was immaculate, flag behind the desk, framed commendations, the faint hum of power in the air. He looked up as we entered, recognition flickering briefly in his sharp gray eyes. Robert, he said smoothly. I was told you retired. Not yet, Alden replied. I had a few loose ends. Vance's gaze shifted to me. And who is this? Major Sarah Collins, I said evenly. U.S. Marine Corps. I think we've met, at least on paper. He smiled faintly. I doubt it. What can I do for you, Major? I slid the photo of Lily across his desk. You can start by explaining this. His eyes flicked down, just for a second. Pretty girl, he said, his tone casual. What about her? She was relocated under your directive. Code HVTXOPS. He leaned back, lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. That program was classified. You have no authority to access those files. I have all the authority I need, I said. She was a child, not a classified asset. Vance's jaw tightened. You have no idea what you're meddling with. The world isn't black and white, Major. Sometimes we bury things for a reason. Then let's unbury them. He stood, towering over his desk. You think you can threaten me? You'll be stripped of your commission before the week's out. The general rose, his voice low but full of steel. Try it. But know this, Harold. If my daughter's name is anywhere in your files, I'll drag you before Congress myself. For the first time, the mask slipped. A flash of fear, or was it guilt, crossed Vance's face. You can't prove anything. Alden smiled faintly. That's the thing about men who hide behind secrets. Eventually, someone like her. He nodded toward me. Shines a light. Vance's voice dropped to a hiss. You don't know what you're starting. I met his gaze squarely. Yes, I do. I'm starting justice. We walked out before he could answer. Outside, the afternoon sun blazed across the marble steps, bright enough to sting the eyes. The general stopped, took a deep breath, and said quietly, He's cracking. He knows it's over. Not yet, sir, I said. But soon. That night, back at the temporary quarters, I couldn't sleep. My phone buzzed at 2:01 a.m. A message from an unknown number. If you want to find the girl, go to Lake Charles, Louisiana. Ask for Lily Carter. Don't tell Alden. Don't tell anyone. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. It could be a trap. Or it could be the lead we'd been praying for. Either way, I was going. I left before dawn, driving south on the empty highway with the first light of morning chasing my taillights. I didn't tell the general. I didn't tell Brooks or Ramos. Whoever sent that message knew where to find me. And that meant time wasn't on my side. The air grew heavier as I crossed into Louisiana. The world softened into fog and pine, bayous glimmering under the sunrise like sheets of glass. It didn't feel like I was driving toward danger. It felt like I was driving towards something sacred, something that had waited too long. The address led to a small lakeside town called Moss Bluff. Quiet, almost forgotten. I parked near the old dock, where the water lapped lazily against weathered posts. Across the road stood a white wooden house with a crooked mailbox. The name on it stopped me cold, Carter. I walked up the path and knocked. The door opened a few inches. A woman in her late 40s peered out, tired eyes, kind face, wearing a faded floral robe. Can I help you? I hesitated. Ma'am, I'm looking for someone named Lily Carter. She froze, hand tightening on the doorframe. Who's asking? My name is Major Sarah Collins, U.S. Marine Corps. I paused. I knew her when she was a little girl. Her expression softened slightly, suspicion giving way to curiosity. She opened the door wider. Come in. The living room smelled of lemon polish and old wood. Pictures lined the walls, birthdays, holidays. A smiling young woman with light brown curls and eyes the color of the sky after rain. Lily. Older now, maybe 18 or 19, but unmistakably the same face from the photo I carried in my pocket. She's at work, the woman said quietly. Community hospital, just outside town. Who are you to her? Someone who's been searching a long time, I said. The woman, Mrs. Carter, sat down slowly. You're not the first. A man came by last year, said he was a lawyer from Washington. Asked questions about her adoption. She didn't want to talk to him. My throat tightened. Did he leave a name? No. But he scared her. I exhaled. Then I'll do my best not to. Mrs. Carter studied me for a long moment. You look like a woman who's seen too much and still hasn't stopped fighting. I've had practice, I said softly. She gave a faint smile. Then maybe it's good you came. Lily's different. Always has been. Nightmares when she was little. Couldn't remember her early years. Said she dreamed about men in uniforms, about a big house with a flag outside. My chest tightened. She remembers. Mrs. Carter nodded. She doesn't know why. The hospital sat at the edge of town, small, plain. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone. I walked in and asked the receptionist for Lily Carter. She pointed me to the physical therapy wing. When I saw her, my breath caught. She was standing by the window, sunlight in her hair, helping an older veteran through balance exercises. Her voice was calm, steady, professional, but warm. When the session ended, I approached slowly. Lily? She turned curious. Up close, it was undeniable. The eyes. The soft jawline. The same features from the portrait in the general's office. My name's Sarah Collins, I said quietly. I knew you once, when you were little. She tilted her head, uncertain. I'm sorry, I don't remember you. That's okay, I said. There's a lot you weren't supposed to remember. Something flickered behind her eyes. Fear or recognition? What do you mean? I reached into my jacket and handed her the photo. The one from the Houston file. That's you? She stared at it for a long time. Her hands trembled. Where did you get this? It was part of a classified government record. A relocation file. You were taken from your real family when you were 6 years old. She shook her head. No, that can't be. I took a deep breath. Your real name is Emily Alden. Your father's a retired Marine general. He's been looking for you for nearly 20 years. Her breath hitched. That's impossible. I wish it were. Tears welled in her eyes. I don't remember any of that. You wouldn't. They erased it. But the pieces are still there. The nightmares. The flag. The uniforms. She pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes unfocused. Sometimes I see a man's face in my dreams. Silver hair, blue eyes. He's always calling me Emmy. I thought I made it up. I swallowed hard. You didn't. We sat on a bench outside, overlooking the lake. The air was still. The water perfectly smooth. She stared at the horizon, voice trembling. Why would anyone do that to a child? Power, I said simply. Your father uncovered something that threatened the wrong people. They couldn't touch him, so they took what he loved most. She turned to me, eyes shining. And you? How did you find me? I smiled faintly. By refusing to stop. She gave a watery laugh. You sound like a Marine. I am. Then you know what it's like. She whispered. To lose people and keep going anyway. Yes, I said softly. But you didn't just survive, Emily. You built a life. You helped people heal. That strength, they can't take away. She nodded slowly, tears running freely now. I want to see him, she said. My father. I pulled out my phone. He'll be on the next flight. When General Alden arrived that evening, I waited near the lake while Lily stood on the dock, her hands clasped tightly. He walked toward her, stiff at first, a soldier facing his own ghost. Emily. His voice cracked on the name. She turned. For a heartbeat, they just stared. Years of pain, hope, and disbelief colliding in silence. Then she ran to him. He caught her, held her like he was afraid she'd vanish again. His shoulders shook, his metals glinting in the dying light. I looked everywhere. He whispered. Everywhere. I know. She sobbed. I think I always knew. I turned away, giving them privacy. The sun slipped behind the trees, turning the water to gold. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers, like the wind across a lake, reminding you that peace doesn't come from victory. It comes from truth. Later, as we stood by the car, Alden placed a hand on my shoulder. Major, I have no words. You don't need them, sir. He nodded, eyes wet. Vance, he's still in Washington. But I have everything we need now. Files. Recordings. Testimony. The truth's coming out. He smiled faintly. Then let me handle the politics. You've done enough, sir, I said quietly. I don't think any of us are done. Not yet. The wind off the lake carried the faint laughter of father and daughter behind us. For the first time in years, it sounded like healing. The following weeks unfolded like a strange dream, part triumph, part reckoning. The headlines hit first. Under-Secretary Harold Vance resigns amid federal probe. Then came the leaks, the internal memos, the classified transfers, the testimonies. I watched the news one night from the small living room of my on-base quarters, coffee growing cold in my hands, as an anchor said the words I'd waited 2 decades for someone to say. Vance is accused of authorizing the abduction and relocation of a minor, the daughter of then Major General Robert Alden, in retaliation for an internal corruption investigation. For the first time, the nation heard what had been whispered in shadows. For the first time, Emily's name, her real name, was spoken out loud. Not as a missing child, but as a survivor. When I visited the Aldens' home a week later, the house felt lighter. There were photos on the mantel again, new ones, Emily and her father at the lake, smiling with the tentative joy of people relearning each other's faces. The general opened the door himself. His posture was straighter, his eyes softer. "Major Collins," he said, his voice full of warmth. "Come in. There's someone waiting for you." Emily was sitting in the sunroom, sketching. When she saw me, she stood quickly, setting the notebook aside. "You really came." "I promise," I said. She laughed. A sound that hadn't existed the first time I met her by that lake. "You know, every night since, I've tried to remember more. And sometimes I do pieces. The smell of the bass, the sound of engines, my mother's voice. It's like the world is giving them back to me, one by one. That's how healing works," I said quietly. "Memory doesn't return all at once. It rebuilds itself, like muscle after a wound." She nodded, wiping at her eyes. "I still can't believe anyone would go to all that trouble to hide me." I looked toward the general. "Power has always feared innocence. But it underestimated Marines." He chuckled at that. "It usually does." A month later, I was called to D.C. to testify before a Senate committee. The hearing room was crowded with press and officials pretending not to be nervous. I sat in uniform, ribbons sharp against the dark blue fabric, while senators asked their questions. "Major Collins," one of them said, "why did you continue investigating after your superior officers told you to stand down?" I met his gaze. "Because a little girl's life mattered more than my career." The room went silent. Somewhere behind me, a Marine guard shifted his stance, subtle, but I caught it. Respect. Another senator leaned forward. "Would you do it again?" "In a heartbeat," I said. "Because justice doesn't serve the system. It serves people." When it was over, I stepped outside into the bright spring air. The Capitol dome gleamed like something reborn. I looked up and whispered, "Semper Fidelis." Always faithful. Not just to command, but to conscience. The following evening, I received an unexpected package, no return address. Inside, a single envelope and a folded note. The note read, "For Major Collins. You reminded me that truth has a cost, but also a purpose." Inside the envelope was a silver pendant, the kind issued to children at St. Mary's Orphanage long ago. On the back, engraved in small letters, EA 2006. Emily's initials. I smiled. Maybe she'd found it among her things. Maybe she just wanted me to have something to remember this by. Either way, it felt like full circle. Weeks turned to months. The investigation widened. Vance's allies fell one by one. Each indictment, another small victory for those who still believed honor could outlive politics. I returned to duty, but requested reassignment. Paperwork and command desks didn't suit me anymore. I transferred to a Veterans Outreach Division, helping young Marines transition home. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. Every now and then, I'd get a letter from Emily. Or rather, Lily Emily Carter Alden, as she signed it now. She'd stayed in Louisiana for a while, working at the hospital, but was planning to start nursing school. Her last letter ended with, "You once told me truth deserves daylight, even if it burns. I think you were right. But sunlight also heals." I kept that one pinned above my desk. One summer evening, General Alden invited me back to Texas. The airfield shimmered in the heat as I stepped out of the car. He was waiting by the hangar, wearing civilian clothes for once, looking 10 years younger. "Emily's inside," he said. "She wanted to show you something." Inside the hangar sat a restored training aircraft, its metal gleaming under the lights. On the side, painted in neat script, were 3 words. "Honor line for Sarah." I froze. "She wanted to name it after what she calls the line that connects all of us," the general said quietly. "The line between duty and mercy." between truth and power. Emily climbed down from the cockpit, grinning. We're calling it the Honor Line Project. Dad's helping me get veterans involved in aviation rehab therapy. You've helped us both find something worth building again. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. Then I just hugged her, a simple, human gesture that said everything words couldn't. That night, as I drove back to base, I pulled over near the old memorial wall. The stars were bright above the Texas sky. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel haunted by ghosts. I thought of Matthews, of Brooks, of Ramos, of everyone who'd risked something to make truth matter. I thought of Emily's laughter by the lake. And I realized something: revenge had never been the point. It had only been the spark that lit the path toward redemption. Justice didn't look like vengeance. It looked like a father holding his daughter again. It looked like a survivor choosing to forgive a world that had forgotten her. And for me, it looked like peace. If you've listened this far, if you've walked with me through the storms, the silence, and the truth, then maybe you know what I've learned. We can't always undo what's been broken. But we can stand for what's right. Even when no one's watching. Even when it costs us. Because sometimes the smallest act, opening a box, asking a question, refusing to look away, can bring light to places that have been dark for too long. So, wherever you are tonight, remember this: honor isn't about the medals we wear. It's about the promises we keep. Tell me, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to fight for a truth that felt impossible? Share your thoughts below, I really want to know.